My number one value was, how do I make more money? Your brain is a computer, and if you ask it bad questions, it gives you some bad answers.
The real-life Wolf of Wall Street, live and unleashed.
I was a natural-born salesperson, buying and selling and trading the ingenuity of others. The culture was bankrupt at its core. Everyone was in on it. When you make money so fast on Wall Street, you don't really build anything. How do you put value on what you're doing? Money is the only barometer of what you're doing, so you have to buy something to make it real. Once I get rich and I get powerful, then I'll feel good. And then, I still feel the same way inside. What do I do now? I was on 22 different drugs at the end, and I thought it was normal. Your values don't really change that easily, unless a disaster happens. When you go to jail, it's like losing the game of life, losing my money, my freedom, my self-respect. In retrospect now, getting caught and forcing to re-examine my values and forcing to come back has allowed me to help people all over the world. It's allowed me to really build a business that I love. Also, for my own kids to see that, they watch their father lose everything and not give up and come back and do it right. You're capable of pushing yourself more, of showing up when you have to. So much is in your head. You can train yourself to be someone. I want to be known as someone that always shows up. That's my secret.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is...
Let me ask you a question. What if you were making $50 million by the time you were 26 with 1,000 brokers working for you? Would you be partying like a rock star with hookers and cocaine and quaaludes and marijuana and morphine? Well, that's what Jordan Belfort decided to do, and he wrote the book, The Wolf of Wall Street, which was later made into an Oscar-winning film with Leo DiCaprio playing him, Martin Scorsese directing, and it's this crazy life of Jordan on Wall Street the same time I was there, basically selling penny stocks out in Long Island to anybody who would buy them. And it became a pump and dump scam. They ended up being tried for securities fraud, and Jordan went away for 2 years for prison. He had a real change in his life. His wife left him, he lost all his money, and he had to come back and remake himself, and now he is back. He's traveling the world, teaching everybody his straight line selling system, which is very effective. And it's how he taught those meatheads how to sell billions of dollars worth of securities to wealthy people. And now he feels free. He feels like he has a purpose, he has a product he believes in. And it was just great spending time with Jordan. This is probably the beginning of a long-term relationship. And I know you're going to enjoy his story. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Jordan Belfort, the former stockbroker, speaker, and best-selling author of The Wolf of Wall Street. At the height of your career, you were earning $50 million a year, employing over 1,000 stockbrokers, and partying like a rock star. Later, you pleaded guilty to securities fraud, spent time in prison, and wrote your book, which was made into the Oscar-nominated film starring Leonardo DiCaprio and directed by Martin Scorsese. Today, you travel the world teaching your step-by-step sales and persuasion method known as straight line selling. Jordan, welcome to London Real.
Thank you very much.
How does this city treat you? What's your relationship like with London?
Amazing.
Yeah?
London's probably, I'd say, I'm not saying this to all over the world. This is probably my favorite. This is my number one or two favorite cities in the world. It is for sure. I've got more great friends in this city I've made over the years. But there's something about London, great food, great hotels, beautiful women. Even though I'm married and loyal to one woman, she's still nice to look, right? very intelligent people, and there's just a certain energy. There's only one thing I would change here: the weather. You guys, it's like it's not sunny here enough. Other than that, it's the best place. It really is. It's amazing.
Is the weather worse than the East Coast?
Oh yeah.
Just because
It's just is. No. I grew up in New York, right?
Yeah.
And it's cloudy here. Well, I don't know why. I guess I gotta do some meteorological studies and see what's going on. But there's a lot of rain here and cloudiness. And New York, it's sunny a lot more. But I would take the people here any day. And I guess it's always about the people. And what's also I love about here is like you go into this is all of us. It's like you go to New York. Oh, let's go. This is a really old, beautiful thing. It's been around forever. It's like it's 110 years old. This building. You have to see this building. Here, it's like 100 years old. That's like it's new here. It's like here, it's like 1,000 years. Like you see, right? It's unbelievable. The average building's a few hundred years old, so it's pretty incredible. It's richer culturally. I think it's great. Yeah, I love it.
As a financial center, do you think you could have ever rocked it like you did in New York here, or is it kind of different? Does the culture feel different?
I think the culture's a little bit different here. I think I think I could have done well. Probably just in a different way. You always want to adapt what you're doing to fit into the culture. We actually had a lot of clients that I know we called over to the UK, called all over the world. But I think more than just here. Remember that it was back. Like the movie came out only maybe 6, 7 years ago, but this occurred 30 years ago. Right. Things have changed. I mean, 30 years ago, they didn't have. The big difference is that people didn't have information at their fingertips. Today, every investor has information. The same information is out there for everyone. So I think that nowadays, if an investor, doesn't educate themselves, shame on them. If someone calls you up on the phone and says, you can find out yourself. Back then, it was not like that. So I think that's a good thing they can do that. So I think the paradigm has shifted now. So not so much from not calling people on the phone. I think more of the information flows now through newsletters, emails, news, stuff like that. But I would have figured it out, I bet.
Yeah, probably, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that lack of information because, we had two different experiences on Wall Street, and yet we still had a lot of the culture of how to make money and really how to withhold information to make money.
Sure.
Now, I was wondering if we could contrast them a little bit.
Sure.
So I started at a place called Bankers Trust in 1993. It was right across from the World Trade Center, Liberty Plaza. And I was hired as a fixed income derivatives trader. They hired me straight from MIT because they wanted my engineering skills to get in there and make those models. We'd sold into institutional investors, but we still tried to rip their throats out, right? With these rocket science trades. You, on the other hand, were completely different setup, right? You were not hiring guys that were, necessarily Ivy League grads. You're doing penny stocks to retail investors, and you move your shop out on Long Island.
Right. For
people that don't understand, but we still had the same mission, which was to go and make a ton of money, right?
I think that, yeah. So actually, it was $5 stocks. I started selling penny stocks.
Okay.
And there's an important distinction because when I tried to sell pennies, I tried that. It didn't work. No one would buy penny stocks.
Okay.
It was too obviously inexpensive. So at $5 to $10, that was the sweet spot that larger investors liked. It was just too speculative at the penny level, right?
Okay.
Which is interesting because in other countries like Australia, their pennies are actually, they sell their mining stocks and they work, but not in the U.S. I'll tell you what I think it really is. I think that there's this aspect of Wall Street where, it's sort of the interests of the customer are not being aligned with the interests of the business. And that's really not a sustainable long-term thing. And I had said that in my book when I wrote it in 2007. And some people said, oh, come on, he's just saying that because he got in trouble. And then the GFC came. And we saw things that were brought to light about, sort of if you see The Big Short, the movie, right? Just the way they talk about that, it can be pretty raw sometimes, right? And pretty ugly. But on the other side of the equation, here's what I would say: is as much as there's the rippage of throats and all that stuff, Wall Street does serve a purpose. The financial sector does serve a purpose. Without it, things would be disastrous. Okay. And there are a lot of really solid players there too. You can't paint everyone. The mistake I made, I don't think there's anything wrong with the hard selling, that I want to make money. It's the idea that I didn't spend enough time on the product I was selling. That was the mistake I made. And I was young and I was naive a bit like that. And I got caught up in the whole whirlwind of making so much money. But that was, I think, the underlying. If you're selling someone a great product, I don't think there's anything wrong with going at them full on if it's a great product.
Right. I understood. And look, I agree. I mean, Wall Street does something they don't get credit for, especially when people watch movies like yours, is that people just think they don't do something. But look, they efficiently move capital around the world so where everything can grow.
Without that, the world would be a complete awful place of poverty. But that being said, there's people like Warren Buffett that represent like the one side that this is perfectly, like he's an amazing guy because he's just so ethical, long-term player and value builder. And then there's the other side of the equation. I don't want to, someone like, let's say the worst hedge fund guy, someone that maybe got in trouble like in the United States, like Stephen Cohn, right?
Yeah, right.
And not that he's a terrible guy, but like where it's just so much about like how much can I make, what edge can I get, right? And I think the truth generally lies in the middle somewhere. There's people all along the spectrum, right? And I think that without, like people want to vilify Goldman Sachs, and they get caught up in a lot of scandals and stuff, but they also serve a purpose. So the idea is to have enough regulation that they don't run amok all the time, but not too much that stifles the flow of capital and causes economies to contract. And I think the big thing is like I really think at the heart of the problem is that if there's ever a system where the interests of the customer are not aligned with the firm will always win. And what I had was like the interests weren't aligned. You make money by buying and selling, you get it? And then so if even makes sense to hold something, the broker will always sell to make a commission. And that's why the hedge fund model was supposed to be better. Okay, so they'll say, well, great, well, here we only make 20% of the profits, but the corruption there was the 2 and 20. Because now, so those that don't understand, 2 and 20 means, I get 20% of the profits by managing money, plus those 2% of the overall capital I control. The problem with that is then that turns into a capital collection business. So the more money I manage, I get that 2%. If I manage $1 billion, well, it comes 20 million and do it at a zero on going up, right? So what happens is it's a lot easier to make a great return on a smaller amount of capital than a larger amount. Right? So if a hedge fund manager's incentive, let me just collect assets because I make more money, he's not going to make the same return as he could if he had a smaller amount. You get it? And then also he needs to prove his activity. He needs to show he's doing something. He has to trade, and that creates churning and commissions. Those are the problems. So anytime the interests aren't aligned, that's when the problems start.
Has Wall Street become more ethical since you and I were there in the 90s?
I think that it reached a crescendo of zero ethics back in 2006, 2007. It was like mass craziness, right?
So it got worse from when you were there.
I think worse, and then after that shock to the system, I think things have gotten better. But I think things are starting to drift back again somewhat. Like what happens is if you look, you remember after the GFC, like the stated income,
this is
like
the crash, right?
After the global financial crisis, everyone was like,
07, 08,
we'll never, mortgages have to be for people that qualify. If you go now, it's almost back to the same thing again.
People giving out mortgages,
Yeah, you're going back to slowly.
It's all a cycle. We
right,
see
it's
it,
like
right?
It's unbelievable. They go back. Memories are short, right? So, I think that it's always going to have that sort of like it goes around and around, and at any given time. But even here's one other point to consider. Even in the worst of times, one thing that you want to remember is that it's not like everyone on Wall Street's corrupt. It's probably even in the worst time, 15%. Most people are trying to do it right.
Yeah.
Not, and then it's only that little sliver is enough to destroy everything, right? That's the problem,
And why do they push it? Why do guys like you want to push it? Look, I was at Bankers Trust, and a couple years later they got indicted, and then they got RICO run against them because they were shown to be doing it to multiple corporates. It was racketeering. I mean, they threw at them what they threw at Al Capone.
I know.
Because they were doing these trades into Procter and Gamble and this kind of thing.
So I'll tell you what it's about. It's like the best lesson for me was coming back from what happened, going to jail, losing everything, coming back and building another business. So what happens very often is that, when you make money so fast on Wall Street, you don't really build anything. You're buying and selling and trading the ingenuity of others. There's no way to really feel like, how do you put value on what you're doing?
Is it an empty existence somewhat?
Exactly. And that's exactly what it, so some people tend to feel it. So what do? Well, you then only have money is the only barometer of what you're doing. So, and then money, it's in the bank. So you have to buy something to make it real. So you buy a huge house, a yacht, a jet. So then that feels really great for like a minute. And then I got to buy a bigger house and a bigger yacht. And it becomes like, so, you don't really, money, as I always say, money's like alcohol. It amplifies. It doesn't change you. if someone's an asshole and they drink, they're a giant asshole when they're drunk, right? But if someone's an awesome, funny person, when they drink, they're the life of the party, right? Money's very similar. It's not going to make you anything that you're not, but it'll make you more of what you are. So what happens to a lot of people, it just amplifies the bad and amplifies the good as well, right? So I think in terms of the GFC, what you saw happening was it was sort of like it's like self-feeding. Everyone was in on it, from the homeowner who bought a house who knew that he really couldn't afford.
The victims.
And then or to the mortgage broker who said to him, "So what do you make?" He goes, 75. How much do you make? You make more like 100, right? Because that's what you need to call 100. Yeah. And what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a assistant. Assistants don't make. Well, aren't you an executive assistant? So the mortgage brokers teaching the homeowners how to lie. The underwriters looking the other way because their boss saying, just approve it because we'll sell it to Wall Street. Wall Street saying, we don't care because we're selling it to Iceland. The rating agency saying, well, if I don't do it, then the other one will do it. And everybody was like in on it. Yeah. And at the end of the day, this is really sad, but countries like Iceland and Greece, they were the ones that really bore the huge brunt of this. It was a gigantic lump of crap, but everybody was sort of complicit in this giant lie. I was in the industry, and I'll tell you, here's what happened. I was in the mortgage industry, and the first time I didn't know anything about subprime loans. I was always an A borrower, in my adult days. And a friend of mine said, "Hey, let's go into business together with mortgages." It's like 2001, right when the refi boom started, right? And first client I got, they wanted to refi the house. Credit came back; they were like a 540 credit score. They didn't get approved through Fannie Mae. So I figured, we'll call option one. I'm like, they're that subprime. Yeah, girl comes in, she looks along. Oh, okay, I could do a 7.5% loan here on a 228, 2 years fixed, 28, then a variable rate. At the time that she said 7.5%, the fixed rate through favor was 7%. I'm like, it's only a 0.5% difference between someone who's got perfect credit and this person who's basically a credit criminal. I'm like, how could they afford to do this? I'm saying, but I guess the bankers have it figured out on what, like everyone thought someone else had it figured out. Like they wouldn't be that stupid as to allow this to happen. So everybody thought that someone else was watching the shop. I had a great friend as a partner at Goldman Sachs. And what were you guys thinking? He goes, we didn't think real estate prices ever go down. Like everyone had their own thing they were looking at about why it wasn't a problem because someone else had it covered, And at the end of the day, it works until it doesn't work and then it's a disaster,
Tell me about when you're making all this money out there and yet I know the feeling, like you don't actually do anything, you don't create anything. Is that why a lot of times the drugs come out?
Part of it, for sure.
Do you think it's trying to fill a hole?
I'll tell you another bit, yeah. So there's two parts to that. That's definitely part of it.
Because there is a culture on Wall Street, the city in London, for that kind of thing,
Let me tell you, I'll tell you that's one part of it, but there's a bigger part of it too. The bigger part of it is that most of us, and I'll be the first to admit that, I emerged from my adolescence. I wasn't the captain of the football team, those popular guy, the suave with girls. Like most of us, we struggled with those things when we were teenagers. And
we were like a science geek.
Me too. I was a science geek. I was gonna be a doctor.
You're a biology major.
But yeah, biochem. I scored perfect on my MCATs. Like I was that guy, right? And so I go into my adulthood with like these insecurities and saying, you know what? But once I get rich and I get powerful, then I'll feel good. So while you're out there striving for success and clawing for it, even though you feel insecure a lot and you don't feel like you're really comfortable in your own skin, you say, I know why. It's because I don't have success yet. But then you achieve massive success and you get everything that you always wanted. And then, I still feel the same way inside. What do I do now? And that's what you see happen, not just on Wall Street, but in Hollywood, with people like Lindsay Lohan's in the world. They get so famous, and they feel like, and while they're trying to get famous, they're okay because they say, well, I don't feel great, but I know I'll feel great once I get famous because that's what my vision is. When I achieve my vision, when I get that, then I'll feel good. Then you're like, that's when the real panic sets in. So with me, it's like I said, if I ever get rich and powerless, and all of a sudden I had every girl after me. I'm like I'm rich by, and I'm still the same guy. That's when I think a lot of the problems start. And you want to start self-medicating and because again, success doesn't change you; it just amplifies you. So any insecurities you have become even bigger and so forth. And I think that's a lot. As much as it is true, on some level you're not creating anything, but also because it's a very lucrative industry, and it is. People make money very fast. You end up, the things that you thought would make you happy, you check a box, wait a second, I'm still not happy. What do I do now? And that's when the panic sets in and people start to really implode. That's, kind of what I think.
Yeah, because the income's so front-loaded in the industry, and it used to be even more.
Even more, right.
The bonuses, now they have them paid in equity
Right,
over
yeah,
time and
exactly,
banks.
yeah,
When
yeah.
I was there, it was like,
No,
here's your $1
upfront.
million, here's your $2 million, here's your money. Same with you,
Yeah.
and now it's like,
No,
okay.
it's some vesting over time, yeah.
Unheard of in history, people in their 20s make this kind of money.
Right.
Then you got those insecurities come out, and then the
Bingo.
drugs are right there.
Right there, so they can afford them. But most importantly, I really believe, is that you thought that once you arrived in the spot, you'd feel good. And when you don't, that's when you're like, what do I do? Like, how do I make sense of my life now? And then drugs help you make sense of that for a short time. And I think that's a really big part of it. And that's why people tend to try to, what's the next thrill? What do I buy? You're always trying to see, if I do this, I'll feel good. If I do this. So finally, for me, this great journey I had in my life was, making all this money, a rise and a fall. And then finally, after the fall, meeting the right woman. I'm very fortunate. I have a great, finally, just a perfect woman for me, my partner, my real soulmate. And you come to this spot in your life where I just realized that I'm okay. I'm good. And then once you're there, the money becomes amazing. The compulsions are lifted to spend it recklessly. I swear to God, it wasn't a car I didn't want to buy. I got every car, blah, blah, this, 18 watches. I don't really care anymore. I love nice things. Still love to fly private. Why not? But the point is, it's not like I feel like that I'm trying to fill something by doing that. I use money in the right way now, and that took a long time. And I wish I could. If you can go back in time and whisper something in young Jordan's ear, that would be it. You're okay.
Yeah.
You're okay, and no one cares. Everyone's got their own shit going on. No one's looking at you, and it's all in your own head. If at the end of the life you have a partner, a wife or a husband or a significant other that you really connect with and understands you and you can trust, a couple of good friends, you're doing really well in this world.
Yeah. So the story of your life is kind of the story of your relationship with money to a certain extent. We both grew up in America as teenagers, and it was just I was selling candy on the buses, you're selling ice cream,
Yeah,
you're selling
exactly.
this. I don't know about you, but for me, that was what America was all about. If you make money, you win.
Were you from a wealthy family or no?
No, kind of upper middle class.
Yeah, so I was middle class, middle lower, but not lower class, middle. So we had enough money to know how little we had. In other words, and also we were in proximity to wealth, Long Island. So it was always about one day when we get rich as kids, we'll move out to Long Island, get a big house, and really we'll arrive. And then, maybe a half a mile was the big houses in the area, right? Called the Bayside Gables, where the rich people live, right? So that was, yes, a very, very similar upbringing in that sense. So yes, I always sort of felt like that was my path forward. It's very money-centric, success-oriented way of thinking. And from the time, I think, I always had a business. Paper out at 8, shoveling driveways after snowstorms at 10, children's magic shows at 12, and then the beach selling ice. I really made big money. That really defined who I was. By the time I started selling ices and I made that first big hit, $200 a day back in the 70s, was a lot, right?
$20,000?
Yeah, it was massive. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable.
Did your self-esteem tick up a few notches?
Absolutely.
Right.
And not just my self-esteem, my beliefs about myself and taking action, my beliefs about self-reliance and resilience. So it really started forming the adult version of who I was, that to this day I would never consider how could I not be successful, because I'm not going to stop until I am. That sort of belief, and the harder I work, the more money I make, versus how I was at 10. I said, oh, go work in this catering hall and sit there, wait to get, but I'll die. I'll kill myself. I'll be the worst busboy in the world because I'll be asleep trying. I'm not picking up that plate because it's not like a sort of profit versus energy out. You get it? So I realized who I was. I found myself pretty young, and because of those root beliefs I had about myself taking action, it paved the way for all decisions going forward.
Right, and that's what built Stratton Oakmont. That kind of was started on the beaches there to a certain
Started
extent.
on the beach. What happened with Stratton Oakmont, and it was really about this. I was a natural born salesperson at this incredibly high level. Whatever reason, we all have gifts. That was a gift I had at a really high level, right? And when I was trying to get my young guys, who were basically nincompoops, right, to close rich people, they couldn't. And this, I originally was selling penny stocks to moms and pops, right? And I had a system of training salespeople that was really good. It was my own. It didn't have a name. And these 12 kids, I give meetings every day, and they were doing really well. Then when I came up with the idea to go to rich people, and I tested it myself and Danny, the Donnie character from the movie, right?
Yeah.
The results were so profound, so massive, I decided to reinvent the firm. I said, wow, this is gonna be simple. All I gotta do is train these 12 kids to close rich people, and you'll really appreciate the story because you come from the larger Wall Street firm, right? I said, I'll be the richest person in the world, right? See, back in the day, in the 80s, when we were going through things, it was the rich people, the kids that went to the good schools would go to the big Wall Street firms.
Yeah.
And the kids that were really educated, they go to the penny stock firms.
It was very elitist.
It was totally, right? And then my cracking the code, it was about that, wait a second, why aren't the regular kids allowed to call rich people? They're too stupid. Rich people are not going to speak to a kid who dropped out of high school. And that turned out to be very, very true. When I tried to do it, I was able to do it. My partner, Danny, was a very smart guy, natural born closer. I trained him, right? The 12 kids couldn't do it. When I invented the straight line system, it was this new way of selling, and it allowed this basically a 12-year-old, 8-year-old nincompoop who just stopped shaving to call someone worth $100 million and sound like a professional and close the person. That's what paved the way for Stratton. Once that started, it allowed me to take all these kids who were basically boxed out of Wall Street to come work for me and call big investors. Because the system of influence allowed it to work. Without the system, I tried it first, it didn't work. When I cracked the code for that, it was on one night, that's what changed everything. And the mistake I made was that it allowed me to sell so much stock so fast, I didn't have enough good product to sell. I ran out of good product. So what happens is, you're a trader, right? So what also happens, I keep buying one stock, it goes up. I started pumping up the value. I wasn't even making money, because I wasn't long anymore. I had no inventory, so the stock's going up. It's not even helping me. And I'm like, shit, what do I do? You get it? My stocks are going up. I'm not even making money because of it. It was an unintended consequence to cracking the code for sales of influence and taking all these kids who could just buy massive quantities of any stock. I should have slowed down the growth. That was my mistake.
Right? Why have 1,000 guys?
Because, my beliefs were somewhat flawed back then.
More was better. You wanted power as well.
Yes, but also, yes, it was part of it. But I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that I had this desire for instant gratification. It's just sort of a mentality that you want everything tomorrow. Now, looking back as a sober adult now, I'm 50 plus years old, right? What is business? What is the purpose of business? The purpose of business is to monetize the delivery of value. That's what businesses do, right? A business has a product, a good, a service.
Which solves the problem of a customer.
Yeah, and it's valuable to someone else, right? And the purpose of an organized business is to deliver the value in a way that actually makes money. Like if it costs you more to deliver the value than you can get from the customer, well, then you lose money, you're not in business. So the purpose of the business is to deliver value, right? Facebook's a great example, and at least in its early days, they were just creating something that everyone wanted. There was no way to monetize it. They said, we'll figure out to monetize it later, and that was through advertising, right? Right. So in the early days, it was very pure, and Google the same thing. And a lot of Silicon Valley does work in that model.
Delaying the gratification.
Yeah, or just let's build something that everybody wants. We'll figure out how to make money on it later, right? That was a mistake I made. It was. In other words, for me, it was about how do you make money? Just make money, not let's deliver value. What I should have done is hire the best bankers and analysts out there so I can get the best products to sell and have these unbelievable products too, and then use my sales force to distribute those amazing products.
Right.
Instead, my sales roared ahead of my investment banking. You get it, because right?
Yeah.
And I ended up having a complete topsy-turvy where I had the greatest sales force in Wall Street history and a terrible investment banking. So it was, and then once I got in trouble where I got but like the SEC said, sued me civilly, right? A lot of the better companies got nervous and shied away.
Right.
So then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Okay. And was that sales force even out of your control at some point? Does it get so big where it's like this hungry machine?
It's yes and no. It's always was that we had a very well-controlled sales force, right? They were ultra loyal. They were trained to a razor's edge.
People don't talk about how you're a company culture master because you built a pack of wolves out there.
I did, but unfortunately, I was a master. But the culture was bankrupt at its core. That's the problem, because there was the product. Like in other words, here's the thing. Right now, I have a business. I'm growing my business, right? Everyone loves my product. My actual sales training, it just works. Right. I go to a seminar, and who's on? Everyone will say, it's the greatest thing in the world, right? There was times, 7 months ago, I rolled out this new program, an online training platform where sales would come on, and I wasn't making any money because I was just testing it out. And I wasn't sure if should I really keep doing this. And I looked at the comments, people. They were just saying, this is the greatest thing in the world. I said, if they liked it that much, I'll figure out how to make money one day from it. Right. The reverse way. In other words, you have something that's so great, everyone loves so much, you'll figure out how to make money. The culture we had was based on just like, we are animal salespeople. We're successful. We're going to work harder. We're going to be and more, skills, more refined. But at the core of it, because you're not delivering value to people, the culture will ultimately collapse. Right. It can't be based on not a lie, but on deceit. And even that's the wrong word. It's really on essentially getting away with something. Everyone in my company, they're just like, all we get is people saying, you changed my life, you changed my life. That's a really nice thing to work. And
it perpetuates.
As
opposed to.
Versus like, customers, you lost me $500,000, right? You're suing. It's like, it doesn't. And then also, other mistakes, I allowed some of the language patterns that were used to skirt on the side of truth. They would never lie on the phone. You couldn't. It was, in Wall Street, it's done. I was in business 10 years. We had a business in 6 months.
Recorded lines,
right,
all that stuff.
So we didn't lie, but it was just sort of misrepresentations, omissions of material fact. And if you don't think that the salesmen know that when they go home at night and they're lying in bed, they can't feel good about that.
Right.
So what happens is it ends up permutating to every other part of the company. So like I always say, in my trained companies, I say to the CEOs, you can't, if you allow your sales force to tell one lie, you know what? They'll start lying to you too. If they lie to the customers, they'll steal from you. So it's got to be, it's got to be pure. And by the way, I'm not saying I'm this great lily white person. It's just even if you're greedy, you make more money by delivering massive value. You'll end up doing better yourself, right?
So good ethics is good business.
I think so, for 100%. You make less money up front for sure. I won't deny that. Very often, maintaining ethics means about not making as much upfront, but making 1,000 times more over the long term and feeling great about it.
So if you had those ethics from the beginning,
I would be bigger than Goldman Sachs by now, probably.
Really, you'd still be in business.
Oh my God,
be
for
a hedge
sure.
fund.
I would have caught the whole internet craze, right? In the late 90s, I went out of business in 97. Imagine if I had the 1,000 guys taking every internet company public. I could have made God knows what we would have been. But I'm glad it happened. No one's happy when they get caught. I'm glad I went to jail. I'm not to be stupid. But in retrospect now, the life that getting caught and forcing to re-examine my values and forcing to come back has allowed me to help people all over the world. It's allowed me to really to build a business that I love, that I can make a difference in people's lives everywhere, and also for my own kids to see that. Watch people say, how did your kids handle? My kids are great. You know why? Because they watch their father lose everything and not give up and come back and do it right. If I would have come out of jail and been a criminal still, what's the next scam? Yeah, my kids would probably be very much damaged. But for them to watch and that's it, I made a mistake and do it right, that's a great role model to your kids.
And you're happy now. You got a good energy. People are loving you, right?
Thank God for that, right? I don't know, honestly.
Because you've been on the other side of that, right?
I had some very tough years. I had some really tough years. The toughest years for me were 1999.
So you're out of jail at this point.
Before jail.
Before jail. Oh yeah, of course.
Waiting to get sentenced and just like living in this purgatory and losing my money, my freedom, my self-respect. My wife walked out. I was like, she left like the day I got indicted. I'm like, didn't you read the Gold Digger's Handbook? I'm like, there's a sort of protocol. When the husband loses the precious ore, you don't leave right away. You got to stick around. For appearances.
A few months.
Yeah, and then say, "Oh, he changed. He's impossible." But like and then, she was out with a pickaxe and shovel looking for a new gold mine, right? Anyway, the point is,
and what about the drugs? You still not sober yet as well?
I was already still no. So the movie's very accurate in many respects. What they did, they fiddled around with the timeline. So I had already been sober for 18 months, almost 2 years, and never. It wasn't like they had me break out the coke at the end. That never happened. That was from a different scene earlier on, right? So I'd been sober, I never relapsed. So I was sober at the time, But I lost, my money, my freedom, my wife, everything. My children were taken from me. She moved them across the country.
Would they talk to you, your children? Did they hate you?
Oh, no. They talked to me.
Did they hate you?
She never turned them against me. I'll give her that much. She never, ever, she was good. She was very good. She never tried to turn the kids against me. I mean, subtle digs, but I would give her she was a 10 out of 10 on the good side for not turning the kids against me. I know some women are terrible with that.
What do you tell your kids when that stuff happens? When
They didn't know. We kept it from them because they were very young. They were like, my daughter was, when it first happened, she was like 5 or 6. My son was 4. They were oblivious. My ex met another man and she moved to the West Coast, right? Okay. I was on the East Coast. That's why I ended up in the West Coast to be near my kids, right? And we didn't tell the kids. And then before I had to report to jail, a few years later, there's always the U.S. is takes time till you actually go to jail, right? Yeah. So we sat my kids down and, said, Daddy made some mistakes. And he asked them, my daughter started bawling hysterically. She was now 9. It was the worst night of my life, honestly, telling my kid, my son was 7, and they're just crying hysterically. And then we had that, it was the night before I went to jail. And then we all slept in one bed together, my 2 kids and I, the night, and then I left, and that was that. And then I was in jail. And then when I go to jail, who's my bunkmate? Tommy Chong from Cheech and Chong. Can you imagine this? So they put me in with Tommy Chong, and not in the same jail, in the same cell. We shared a cube together, right? And we became good friends. And there's not much to do in jail but tell stories. Right. So, Tommy's telling me stories. I'm laughing, and I'm telling him stories. He's rolling on the floor. The 3rd night, he says, honestly, I thought you were full of shit. I thought you were making this stuff up, the yachts, because my wife Googled you. It's actually true. You did all this. Because you have to write a book. So I was like, really? He's like, yes, write a book. I'm like, well, I don't know how to write. He goes, just write the way you speak. I was like, okay. So I tried that, and it didn't work. You can't write the way you speak. It's very different. They don't translate, right?
You wrote like 100 pages in prison, and you threw it away, right?
Well, what happened was I started writing like 10 pages, and I showed him to Tommy. He's like, that's really awful. I'm like, well, thanks, Tommy. Tell me what you really think, right? So at first I couldn't write. It was just very dry and boring. Then I went into the prison library. But after a month of trying and failing and very frustrated, I stumbled upon the book Bonfire of the Vanities by Tom Wolfe, which I'm sure you've read, right?
Yeah.
And as soon as I started reading, I'm like, oh my God, I want to write like that. So I finished the book. Then I took out my yellow highlighter. I was a very good student in school, was well academically. And I used this book like a textbook. And I started going through and cracking Tom Wolfe's strategy for writing. Like, how does he introduce characters? How does he describe locations? How does he create? I started noticing it was like I never even considered the word had, H-A-D. Like I was like, oh, now I know why my sentences don't make sense. Because if I want to describe the past, I got to use the word. I didn't realize this stuff. There's a strategy for writing. Okay. Like I think some of the mistakes that people make in becoming successful, they forget the fact that it's typically a specialized skill set. If you want to succeed at something, you have to learn the actual skills. So I had this idea. I wanted to write a book. I have a vision. If I write this book, it could become a great thing. Okay, great. But what specialized skills do you need to know? One of them is how to write. I didn't know. So I used this book. I taught myself to write. Then my second book was Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. That was my second textbook.
Right.
And my writing improved dramatically because of those books. And I wrote about 100 pages, as you said. Then I ripped them up because I didn't think they were good enough. Got out of jail. Wrote 10 pages again now. And I looked at these 10 pages. It's like 2005. I'm like, wow. I'm like, I think they're pretty good. Like to me, they seem good. I never liked my writing before. And I sent it to a couple of friends, and they all called back like, oh my God, it's great. I'm like, really? So I was like, all right. So I knew very casually someone was an agent. I sent them the pages, and here's the interesting part. He calls me back, and I goes, is that a joke? Did you pay Tom Wolfe to write those pages? He thought Tom Wolfe wrote the first 10 pages. Because back then, it changed. The original 10 was like so much like Tom Wolfe. Okay. It's like if you knew Tom Wolfe, you'd say, wow, he wrote them, right? So, which I thought was a victory for my strategy, right? Anyway, and he goes, you got to stop what you're doing. He goes, you have to write this book. This book is going to be a huge success. I thought the guy was crazy, but I was just out of jail. I didn't know what to do. So what
were your options at that point?
My options were to build another business. I assumed I'd get rich again by building a business. I didn't know what it would be. Right?
You could personally trade after, but you couldn't start a securities firm. That's all out.
Exactly. I couldn't own a firm, but I could trade for myself. But to me, as a person that I'd already run Steve Madden Shoes, I built that up.
Right.
I never doubted I'd make money again. That wasn't really my worry. I knew I'd get rich at some point because I kind of was that sort of person. Right. I didn't know how. But, I was tired. I was like worn down. Also, when I was writing that book, even those first 100 pages, it's like almost like a lot of catharsis in there. It's like therapy. And you start seeing things about yourself. And I just made this decision. I said, let me give this a whirl. And I literally holed up in this little tiny apartment I had in Playa del Rey, California, right? And it was something about this place. It was overlooking the water. It was tiny, not expensive, great energy though. And I didn't speak to another human being for almost a year. Only my kids would come over. They say, Daddy's writing this book, Wow. And I did something pretty interesting in terms of success. So after about 20 pages in, and I now had, my age, like, this is gonna be huge. I didn't think I could finish. I never wrote before. I was like really nervous. So I went to my daughter. It was like my closest friend back then. We were really close, my daughter, right? Okay. My son was still small. I said, guess what, Chandler? She goes, what? She said, Daddy's gonna write a bestseller and become famous. Now, I did that because I knew that once I told her, I would have no choice but to make it happen. I embarrassed myself. And then she goes, Mommy, Mommy. And then I was screwed. And she told my ex-wife. And then I had no choice. She's like, oh, yeah, sure. And then, imagine what happened after that, right? So I literally holed up and I just wrote and wrote and wrote. My manuscript was 1,100 pages. Whew. And then I went through, after about 3 months, I had 50 pages. And my agent goes, I have to send these to a publisher because I'll get you some money. And he got them to Random House. They bought it on the spot, and I got a big check from Random House. Now I was broke, right? And I got, they bought it for like $700,000 right there. And so I was like, wow, it was a life changer. And then,
and what did you learn about yourself when you wrote that book? When you got to look back on Jordan's life, 10 years later, right? Sure. So 8 years later, what did you see? Patterns, things you're talking about today?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Well, the biggest. A number of things. Number one was the number of voices in my head. I think why people like the book a lot, why people really get into it, is because I'm like talking to myself through the whole book, weighing my options, and I'm seeing how I'm my own worst enemy. Like how I have this voice is narrowing. I know I shouldn't be doing this I know I should be doing some, and like you start to see your faults like in high relief. And when I was able to look back and see the decision, leaving my first wife and my second wife, I did my best dating after I was married. It was like all the things, the drug addictions and all the things I had done. It's like, and when you write, it's like you're peeling back the layers. So it's like, it's like the first draft is everything is rich. It's like you write the first draft and you say, oh yeah, wait, and that it ignites a memory and a deeper memory and a deeper. So you start to really dig out the deepest recesses. In some level, it's exactly what therapy is about. Right. When you go into therapy, when you write a memoir like that, and if you're really going to do it honestly, it's like self-therapy. And I started to see like the mistakes I made and the things I did really well. And I saw I had all these amazing strengths, all these great talents, and some of these terrible, frailties and weaknesses that I allowed to get the best of me. So I think on many levels, I felt different when I left jail. Not that I felt like I was a different person. I felt like I was the same person my parents had sent out into the world when I was 20. I was a good kid.
Right.
I wasn't growing up, nothing like, I love, the old movies like Goodfellas. I didn't grow up with a family like that where I was like, we were, knocking over, cars, and I was the most legitimate. Parents are accountants. So like, I felt like I was back to that person. That with values and stuff. And then, I got very lucky. I met the right woman also. And that is a big thing, and whether you're a man or a woman, and it doesn't matter who that person is, what the sex is, but when you meet someone, they can either make you better or make you worse. And I don't mean about someone filling your holes, because no one can fill your holes. But some people enter your life and they just make you better versions of who you are. That's my current wife. Is just like that. She's just like this person that she represented to me everything I always wanted in a woman, looks-wise and integrity-wise. And I felt like I truly had a partner and a friend that I could trust, and that she just had never sold out throughout her life. And it was just, and then she had a son who became my son. I raised him, and he works for me. He's an amazing kid now. He's like, he's just amazing, right? All my kids are great. And so I think it was a big thing also, is who you surround yourself with. Your mother probably said to you, if you lay down with dogs, you're going to wake up with fleas, right? It's a big expression from the United States, right?
Yeah.
It's true.
How does she bring out the best stuff in you?
Because she's not, it's harsh. She loves nice things. She loves money. her whole life is based on ethics and integrity. Seriously. She's never, and you could agree with her opinions. She's got strong opinions on certain things, but she's always been very true to who she is.
Right.
And she's not going to sacrifice it for anybody. And I think I did a lot of that in my life of just trying to please others. And in fact, in the book, I always said I feel like I'm almost an actor on the stage in my own life, doing what people think I should be doing versus what I want to be doing, you know? And I just think that, you know, part of it was her for sure. And also part of it was, you know, when you go to jail and you lose, like it's like losing the game of life. You know, they always say, you know, your values don't really change that easily unless a disaster happens. I was forced to re-examine my value system. My number one value in my 20s was, how do I make more money? I want to make money. I want power, money, hot women, sex, money, power, right? That was, and I'm not alone like that in my 20s, but that was my values, right? Today, like making money is not even my top 5 values, and I love money more than ever. Because I know I don't have to worry about that. If I just give value to people, I possess the skills to turn it into a profitable business. The more value I give, the more people I reach, the more money I make. I don't have to put money first. Money is the outcome of giving massive value and applying correct business principles versus waking up every day saying, how do I make more money? We should just rip people off. Maybe we should like pump the stock. Your brain like is a computer. And if you ask it bad questions, it gives you some bad answers. How do I make more money? How do I make, well, we could always, you know, kind of collude with that firm over there and do this again. Now I would like, I wouldn't do, if I have one person who ever complained, here's your money back. I don't want anyone to touch my life and not think they got 10 times a better deal from me than I got. I'm okay with that. I'd rather someone say, wow. And that's the people on my platform. If you go on there, happy you're free, just check it out and just watch the comments that people say, this is ridiculous. How does he do this? How does he give this much value? Because it's like $20 a month and I should charge $200 or $300 a month. But I do it because I know I'm playing the long game. You know what? I'll get 1 million people on it. Very different story. And look at Jeff Bezos as a great example. Yeah. People say, how is he doing all this stuff? How is he giving away books? He got to be losing. He was losing money, but he understood that he was providing a valuable service, and eventually, over time, you can make a lot of money like that.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.